Hey everybody, Tim from Black Swamp Percussion here, and welcome to episode 1 of our new Black Swamp podcast series. We have the opportunity to work with some amazing artists and educators from around the world. We're doing some really cool stuff in the percussion community, so we thought we'd take this chance, share some of their stories, things they got going on, stuff like that. So before we jump into our first interview, we got a few things going on here at Black Swamp Percussion. Dynamics Drums, which is a division of Black Swamp Percussion, was recently at the Chicago Drum Show exhibiting some of our Dynamics drum set style snare drums. So if you're not familiar with those, visit our website, www.blackswamp.com, and search for Dynamics Drums. We also just wrapped up our 2019 BSP Percussion Ensemble Showcase. This is a video competition for college soloists and high school percussion ensembles, judged by Black Swamp artists and educators. And judging is underway, and results will be released or announced shortly, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, we're going to have a chat with Terry Longshore, who is a Black Swamp educator, teaches at Southern Oregon University, and is doing some really cool stuff in that area. We're going to talk about how he got started, a brief stint in the financial world, which is interesting, and some other projects and activities he has going on. Terry was actually in Michigan visiting Keith Aleo up at Interlochen, so he came down to our facility. We gave him a tour of the shop, had lunch, and had a conversation and pressed record. So here you go. Terry Longshore, thanks for coming to BSP headquarters.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Was it everything you thought it would be?
It's amazing.
Cool. I appreciate you taking some time to sit down with us or me, and kind of what I want to talk about a little bit is about why you're in Michigan for one, and then where kind of how you got started, where you're from. I know you have a lot of varied interests and have a lot of different projects going, so kind of get a handle on some of that, and then we'll kind of see where that goes. So
cool.
So why are you in Michigan? We're in Michigan, by the way. I don't know if you realize that. We're in Holland, Zealand, Michigan, just on the Lakeshore. So
yeah, my first time here.
Oh, okay.
Not in Michigan, but down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've been out at the Interlochen Summer Percussion Institute.
Okay.
So I spent all day yesterday doing clinic, masterclass, and performance there with 30 percussion students from all over the U.S.
Right. And that was like a one-day, intense.
Yeah, one day intense. Keith worked me.
Right. Keith Aleo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know him through Zildjian?
Through Zildjian,
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. He's okay. He's a nice guy. So what kind of things were you, I sort of saw online you were doing some vibraphone stuff. Prepared vibraphone, which I thought was interesting, or some other things. Like, what were you working with the kids on?
I did a clinic on kind of approaches to polyrhythm.
Okay.
I call it "It's All Twos and Threes." That's the name of the clinic.
Right.
And as part of that, I played one of the movements of Eric Griswold's prepared vibraphone solo he wrote for me a couple years ago called Twos and Threes.
Okay.
That we worked on together when I was down there in Australia. And but then bring in concepts from Indian music, spoken syllables from the classical music of India, ways to incorporate that into how we think about rhythm in our music, and some other examples from music that I've written or from other people's music.
So how do you, as an example, how do you incorporate that into more Western?
Yeah, so one simple example is the idea of, thinking about something as simple as a 4/3 polyrhythm.
Right.
And, sometimes we learned these, pass the goddamn butter, those kind of things to help us think about rhythm. That's, what one of my teachers taught me. But I try to break it down with them to thinking about, the groupings and using these Indian syllables as groupings.
Oh, okay.
And changing the groupings that you're using, but not the pulse or the rhythm, and that will bring out a different polyrhythm.
Yeah, and it's definitely a different way to think about it, and maybe a little more engaging and interesting.
Yeah,
and then maybe that makes it easier to kind of identify with the concept more of polyrhythms. Is that kind of
I think
it works out sometimes?
Yeah, because it draws your mind to really it's all about how rhythms are grouped is what makes
sure.
the polyrhythm, and so it really highlights that aspect.
Right.
And it's also very easy to vocalize, which I appreciate. I think if we can vocalize something, our chances of playing it correctly are much better.
If you can speak it, you can play it, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Sometimes. Yeah. And then how do you prepare a vibraphone?
So the vibraphone's prepared with a whole bunch of stuff taped to it. And Eric approaches it the same way he does in a lot of his prepared piano music, where he has certain pitches prepared certain ways and others different ways to highlight different tonal relationships in the composition.
Right.
So there's some notes with paper, we use folded paper,
right,
taped to the bar, so it creates kind of a slapping sound.
Okay.
Some little squares of cardboard that's a little bit more, it's a little louder slapping sound,
right,
a little more clicky. There's tin foil that's wrapped around the end of the bars that buzzes and vibrates like a distorted guitar a little bit.
Yeah, cool.
There's coins taped to some of the keys and paper clips taped to some.
Well, not too destructive, though.
No, none of it hurts the instrument at all.
Yeah. That's cool. Because sometimes I know a lot of more contemporary music or snare drum solos, especially, a drum might be prepared in a sense, or they're using different implements or playing on the shell. And so I always like to know about those things, especially if they're using a Black Swan snare drum, and help promote it. But then I'm always a little bit nervous, like, what's going to happen, to the instrument. But it is, I think, people are always real conscious of that and aware of it. And so,
there's that great example in the Three Dance Movements by William Russell, which is, from the 1930s, where he has you saw a cymbal.
Oh, yeah.
So, nothing that destructive.
With a bandsaw?
Yeah.
Or no?
No, just a handsaw.
Oh, okay. There was when I was in college, there was a piece that called for playing a vibraphone with brass bell mallets, and it was no.
Yeah.
They didn't know
not a good idea.
Yeah. Well, choose a different implement, please. So you're in Michigan just for a limited time, just the last couple days, and then you're headed
I fly back tomorrow.
Okay, back to Oregon, Southern Oregon University.
Mm-hmm.
And how long you been there? I think you said
just
18?
Finished my 18th year. Yeah,
which is the same. We were talking earlier in the shop. It was basically the same year I started working here. So we'll hug afterwards.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll share a work anniversary, which is pretty cool. But you're not from Oregon, though.
Nope, originally California.
Yeah.
Fresno, California.
Okay. And then we were talking again earlier where you went to school, undergrad and grad stuff. So, which I found pretty interesting off the bat is your undergrad degree was actually in business.
Yeah.
And not specifically music business, but you wanted to be a banker?
Well, I don't think I knew what I wanted to be.
Right.
That was one of the problems.
Yeah, sure.
I was playing music the whole time. This was at Fresno State University.
Okay.
But I wasn't sure what I was destined to be at that point.
Okay.
So I ended up with a business degree. It took me a while to even figure out that was going to be the path.
Right.
And then graduated from college, got hired by Wells Fargo Bank to go into their business loan officer training program.
Okay. That sounds... Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting and fun for a little while. But then after I got done with the training and was actually doing the work, it didn't take long for it to just kind of not stimulate me anymore.
Yeah, sure.
And
if you're wired differently, I think it's a lot with a lot of things. If that's not how your mind's wired or how you approach life in general, it's it's not going to hold your attention. So you're probably searching for something else to do.
I was, and really, made me realize how important music was to me.
Yeah, sure.
And so then decided to go back to school, get a second bachelor's degree in music, which I did at Sacramento State University with two great teachers, Ronald Holloway, and then he retired, and Dan Kennedy came in to replace him. And Dan really turned me on to, contemporary percussion, solo and ensemble percussion, as well as tabla and the music of India.
Yeah.
And so then after that, went to UC San Diego for my master's and doctorate with Steve Schick.
Right.
The irony of the whole thing was the whole time I was at Fresno State, Steve Schick was the professor of percussion there.
Right.
But I didn't know at that point I was interested in contemporary percussion.
Right.
So I was playing saxophone still, then quite a bit, jazz saxophone.
But
as
you
well
crossed
as drum
paths with
set.
them somehow?
Yeah, we crossed paths. I ended up taking a jazz and rock appreciation class from him. And that was my first exposure to him. And it was just clear that he was a genius, and
Right.
his teaching was so inspirational, even just in that setting, that I knew that was a special person I wanted to study with later.
Yeah, so doctoral work.
Master's and doctorate.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, I see. Yeah, great. And when that was, I won't ask you how long ago that was.
It's okay. It was 1994 to 99 was when I was
okay.
down at UC San Diego.
Yeah. And then, so you graduate, then was it straight up to Oregon?
No, it was straight to North Dakota, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, interesting.
So my first job out of grad school was at Valley City State University.
Oh, okay.
In Valley City University. It was a 1-year replacement job that was supposed to be theory and percussion for some theory teacher who was not a percussionist, but a theory teacher who went on sabbatical. Right after they hired me for the job, before I went, the band director resigned, and they called me and said, "We really like you. We're wondering if you would consider doing the band director and percussion instead of theory."
Okay.
The caveat is that it will still have to be a 1-year position, since that's how we hired you, but then it would be a tenure track position after that.
I see.
And I said, well, sure, let's give it a go and see what it feels like. And so I did that job for a year, but I knew pretty early on that just wasn't the place in the country that I wanted to live.
Right.
That some of the performing opportunities and collaborative opportunities that I needed artistically were not there.
Yeah.
So I told them pretty early on that I was, not going to entertain staying.
Right.
It was a great experience. I met some great people. My son was born there.
Oh, yeah.
So I have some, great memories, and
Sure.
it was a really valuable first job.
Right.
But then I got hired at Southern Oregon University the next year. So
Yeah.
been there ever since. Love it there.
But it was a band director position also?
Yeah, I
So
was
you were-
director. I was the wind
conducting?
ensemble, pep band, jazz band director.
And you had you sort of training in that sense too,
well,
like
I had
conducting,
what
or you
most
was on the
typical
job?
undergraduates have.
Yeah.
No, so it was that was a steep learning curve for
Yeah.
me. I was not trained as a conductor. It was a very small school. I mean, the wind ensemble was like 22 people. It was really small.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot in that experience. I think the part I was the best at was the jazz band, because I came from a jazz background.
Okay.
And when I was hired at Southern Oregon, that part of my job initially there was doing the jazz band also.
Oh.
So, super valuable first job experience, a lot of learning happening in every aspect, and a lot of things they don't teach you in graduate school about what it's going to be like in a faculty position where, you're learning on the fly, as many of us do, but super valuable.
And then, I mean, some of the conversations we've had today, like at lunch and in the shop and stuff, have kind of revolved around some of that, where you don't always have a plan, or you almost never have a plan, or and where you are, and those experiences that you have kind of add to what you have to offer later, or even things related to Black Swamp. Eric didn't start, he didn't start off his musical career knowing he was gonna start a percussion instrument company. And even in myself, I have 2 percussion performance degrees and never thought I would be working for a percussion instrument manufacturer. So it's kind of a process or an evolution, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's, from our conversations and knowing you the last several years, I think is pretty interesting, because by the time you do get to Southern Oregon, and well, I'm sure you've been there 18 years, so a lot has happened since then too, but you have business experience from a degree. You have experience with music from other cultures and other instruments, non-Western music type of experience, jazz, rock, solo, ensemble, like it's just like incredibly well-rounded and diverse, and that probably wasn't your plan either. It's just kind of experience that you gain along the way.
Yeah, a lot of it is. And I think, kind of a common thread with a lot of us percussionists is we crave the variety and that percussion brings.
Sure.
We love playing drum set and marimba and vibraphone and multiple percussion and snare drum, and so a little bit of that is built into our craft, I think,
Yeah, sure.
And all those different experiences help mold us into, we can't be the best at everything, but we can certainly be pretty good at several of them, and really enjoy that process. Yeah. And the job at Southern Oregon, when it was advertised, the job description was, as a lot of these, especially at smaller universities can be, it was percussion, jazz band, music business, and teach a world music class. And I looked at that job description and I said, well, that's me.
Yeah.
I mean, those are my experiences right
Sure.
there. And my primary and secondary areas throughout my career, both educationally and performance-wise.
Yeah.
So it turned out it was just a really good fit.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to build a percussion program. It was very small when I got there, both in, number of students and facilities and instruments and all of that. And I've been, able to build that into a really wonderful program. And so some of those other responsibilities have fallen by the wayside as I've built the percussion program. But still, I still teach a music business class there. I teach a summer class along with my wife that we developed called Art and Music of the 20th Century to Present, which is a fun course that we built together. I don't do the jazz band anymore, but that at some point became, the percussion program was growing and felt that energy needed to be devoted more to that. But,
yeah, sure. What's I was reading online about health rhythms facilitator. Like you're is that something that you developed or that you're trained?
No, that's a program that Remo puts on.
Oh, okay, that's right.
It's called Health Rhythms, which was developed by several people who are therapists and music therapists. And it's a really wonderful curriculum program for drum circle facilitation, but for building community and engagement and empowerment. And that was something I just did this last year that, I've always appreciated drum circle facilitation, and I've had people come in and do that at my university many, many times, but it's nothing that I've ever been trained in or necessarily felt called to learn how to do. But just in the last couple of years, I've started to feel like I need to have another way to give to my community.
Yeah, connect.
And I've seen how powerful music can be for so many different people in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, needing to be trained to be a professional performer, but just engaging with music.
Right.
And so I decided to do this training because I was just feeling that call, So I signed up for it, and I'm a Remo artist also, so I knew, I knew of it through that, and I talked with Bruce Jacoby, who's the person I work with at Remo, and he spoke very highly of the program and has gone through some of the training himself. All the employees at Remo have, actually.
Oh, okay.
And it was a big passion of Remo Belli's in the last part of his life.
Right.
That every home should have a drum, basically, and everyone should be participating in music making. So
our homes have many.
We have enough for everyone. So I went and did this 4 days of training, and it was just very powerful, really moving.
Cool.
And I've already
that's right on their campus, like the Remo facility. Because I know you mentioned earlier you had been there, and Eric and I visited a couple months ago, and they have a great, the manufacturing facility is amazing, but even like they have a huge studio where they, do a lot of the drum circle, like facilitating and then other workshops and programs and stuff.
Yeah,
it's super cool.
It was actually the inaugural event in that studio when I was there in January. They had just opened that.
Yeah.
And they just dedicated it the day before. It was really wonderful, and it's something that I've already been pulling in some of the facilitation ideas and techniques into my teaching, both in my percussion courses, but in other courses too. Yeah. And it's not anything that's specific to percussion or music even. It's really a lot of the people who were going through the facilitation with me were therapists or in the healing arts in different ways. Only 3 people out of the 14 I was with were drummers.
Yeah. Cool.
And I learned a lot from everybody there. It was really great.
Yeah. And then, so outside of your school, are you involved like in your community with those types of programs or other musical activities and stuff?
You mean specific to facilitation or?
Well, either with a drum circle, but I know you're involved in other, like you mentioned, like not music festival, like film festival and stuff like that. But so you maybe with the health rhythms, like facilitating, are you doing that?
Yeah, I'm still very new to that, and I've done now drum circle facilitation for our whole campus, and I'm planning another one of those for incoming students in the fall.
Right.
But that's as far as I've taken that so far. I'm still, I'm kind of gradually getting into that.
Yeah.
It's still very new to me, and it's not something I haven't had the time to just dive in full bore, but I also don't want claim to be an expert just right out of the gate either.
Huh.
But yeah, as far as performing, I have lots of projects I'm involved in. Of course, through the university, we have a very active performing program with the percussion studio there.
Sure.
Left Edge Percussion is my ensemble of graduate students and occasionally upper level undergraduate students. But then I have a flute and percussion duo called Caballito Negro.
Okay.
And that's what I was telling you about earlier. We composed music for 3 silent films at the Ashland Independent Film Festival this last April, performed them live, and that was a really cool experience.
Yeah. Was that your first time doing like sort of film score or composing for film?
Yeah, that was my first time composing for film. I've improvised to live silent film before, and I've played along in orchestras, with animated films and things of that sort. But that was my first time composing music for silent film. That was a really interesting process.
Well, yeah, what is the process?
Well, so Tessa Brinkman is the flutist I work with in Caballito Negro, and she and I work together. This is not our first composition together, but was the first time we'd done something for film.
Yeah.
And so we work together on that. We may, develop ideas independently, but it's a very collaborative compositional process. So we had 3 pieces. One of them was for she played flutes and toy piano and melodica.
Oh, okay.
And I played a whole variety of percussion, including,
black swamp wood blocks.
Yes, lots of things. Waterphone and kalimba and all kinds of, miscellaneous accessory percussion. Yeah. So that was the biggest setup. But the shortest piece, and in a way, the simplest piece in a way. The second piece was for bass flute and vibraphone, and the third piece was for just prepared piano that we both played.
Yeah, cool.
And all of the pieces had some improvisation in them. The first one I mentioned that had the most instruments had the least amount of improvisation. It was almost fully scored.
Sure.
And the other 2 had kind of a mix of scored material that we played every time the same way, and some improvisation within them as well.
And then outside of that, you 2 tour, and because I remember a couple of years ago, I went up to Interlaken to see Keith and do like a BSP sort of petting zoo presentation, and I opened Keith's office door, and you're standing there with him, which I thought was totally cool. And because you were on tour, you were actually in Michigan with the duo and playing and sort of.
Yeah, we were actually, the duo was touring with another group, which was 7 musicians. All 5 of the other musicians were from Chicago.
Okay.
And we were touring a whole variety of music that was based on music of India and the Middle East.
Right.
But while touring, we were rehearsing for our own tour, which was coming up just a couple of weeks after that.
Oh, I see.
So that's what we were doing at Interlaken. Keith was gracious enough to let us come and do some rehearsing while we were in town.
Yeah. Cool. So I do want to back up for a second, because you said something that I wanted to follow up on a little bit. You were actually a saxophone player?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually started as a piano. I started taking piano lessons when I was 5.
Oh, okay.
And actually took lessons for 10 years. So I can play piano, and I was able to test out all my piano proficiency stuff in college, which was wonderful. I wrote my piano teacher a thank you letter when that happened. And then in 5th grade, I started playing flute, and then in 7th grade, I started playing saxophone.
Okay.
And I kept playing saxophone through college.
Yeah.
And primarily jazz saxophone.
Right. So where was it meeting Steve Schick then, that knowing that he was a percussionist and kind of gravitating to him, that drew you to percussion, or was there something else in there?
It was a very gradual path. It started in high school marching band.
Oh, okay.
When I got into high school, I just really fell in love with what the drum line was doing.
Yeah, sure.
So I joined the drum line, then I went and marched in drum and bugle corps.
Okay.
Then I started playing drum set, rock and jazz drum set.
So you were doing like simultaneously. It wasn't I changed my mind.
Yeah, in fact, when I was at Fresno State, again, not as a music major, I played drums in the B jazz band and saxophone in the A jazz band.
Oh, okay.
the A Jazz Band drummer had been there years. He was a great drummer, so that that wasn't even an option. But the B band needed a drummer, so I'm like, I'll audition. So I got the drum chair in the B band, but I was playing second alto saxophone and doubling on flute and soprano and other things in the A band. So
then when you went to get your graduate degree, it was an emphasis in percussion.
So this was while I was a business major, all of that, and then when I went back to get my second bachelor's degree, that was purely percussion, and I stopped playing saxophone at that point.
See. Do you miss it?
I don't. As I tell people, when they know I played all these instruments, they're like, well, how did you decide on percussion? Or how did you pick percussion? And I say, well, it picked me because
interesting.
I was always pretty good on the other instruments, but I didn't practice a lot.
Yeah.
But with percussion, once I started getting into it, I couldn't stop practicing, really. I was just so addicted to it.
Yeah. But, I mean, so it's interesting, just like the keyboard experience that you had, like piano experience, and then playing saxophone for so long. Like, what an edge, that could give you, like, musically.
Oh, yeah.
What a benefit.
Yeah, and I sang in choir, too, when I was a kid.
Jeez, what didn't you do?
So when I grew up, I'm in church singing in choir as a little kid, I never realized how much that would benefit me later, too, So I think playing piano and singing in choir are two of the greatest things anybody can do to develop their musical skills.
Are your kids musically inclined? Or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. What do they do?
Well, my daughter doesn't really play anymore, just for fun sometimes, but she plays electric bass, but she also... They both my kids started with piano when they were young and did that just for a little while, but didn't really get into it. And then she played trumpet through middle school and high school, and then got into electric bass. Yeah. And my son started on piano. He played saxophone and played percussion in middle school. Okay. Didn't play in high school. He just graduated from high school, but he's now really into beat production and creating beats and loops. And he's going to college to study music technology.
Yeah, great. So I have a 10-year-old daughter. Well, I have two daughters, but the oldest is 10, and she sings like in the children's choir at church and is kind of interested in that. And I've been, I just need to make her like take piano lessons, but I've been like, I think this would be really cool for you, like to have that kind of skill, and then to start to build the theory. And if you're going to go into music, even just through high school or even into college, and she's of course, she's resistant because it involves practicing and learning and work. So, because that's definitely one thing that, I didn't, my parents made my sister take piano lessons when she was a kid, and then they didn't make me take them. So, I wish I would have had that experience as a kid, because I think it's obviously would have been beneficial.
Oh, yeah. I feel very lucky to have had those experiences.
Yeah. So any other cool projects or anything you want to share that's going on before we move on to the stuff that's really going to make you sweat?
Yeah, sure. So the big performing things I do now are, of course, the Cabito Negro duo. Yeah. I play with a group called Flamenco Pacifico, which is a flamenco ensemble. Half of the group lives in Ashland, where I am. The guitarist, Grant Ruiz, and myself, and he's our singer also. And then the other half, Berto Boyd, guitarist, and Elena Villa, who's a dancer, live in Portland. Okay. And then we have another dancer, Melissa Cruz, who has been joining us lately. She lives in San Francisco. So it's a true kind of West Coast ensemble. Makes rehearsing a little tricky, but we tend to have some intense rehearsal periods around tours.
Or Skype, you could sort of...
some of that has happened,
I believe it.
Yeah, or working just in pairs sometimes too, But that's...
So what's your type of instrumentation for something like that?
So I play cajon primarily. It's the main instrument, but I also use udu and doumbek, and I use some shakers and suspended cymbal kind of texture stuff. Yeah.
Is that all original music then?
It's mostly original music. Yeah. We do a few covers, but it's mostly original.
Okay. And then you mentioned dancers, so is that, forgive me, I'm not up on my, like flamenco, but are there specific dances that they do to your original music, like style, or is it sort of they're sort of composing their own?
So there are many different styles in flamenco, and so each one is a different kind of rhythm family. It's a different tonality family, and then it has a specific style of dance that goes with it as well. And in flamenco, the song, the dance, the music, all of it is closely tied. They're really all part of the same thing. Yeah. And so, so we have, if we're doing, for instance, a tangos, which is a style of 8-beat rhythm, flamenco music. There's certain songs that are sung for that. There's certain dances that are danced. It all goes together.
Cool. Man, I don't know. This is super interesting. Like the varied like projects that you're involved in, and just all the different aspects of music and percussion. And so
yeah, it's a lot of fun. The big one for Left Edge Percussion coming up is there's a piece called Tower Music, composed by Joseph Bertolozzi, who's a composer who lives in New York, sorry. And he created this piece a few years ago for the Eiffel Tower. He got permission from the French government, went to Paris, and made samples of the Eiffel Tower from the foot to as high as you can go.
Yeah.
Playing on the surfaces of the Eiffel Tower with all kinds of sticks and mallets and battering rams, and took a whole film and audio crew, recorded thousands of samples, and then created this piece of music where he, plays those samples through his computer, composed the music for it. It's all notated and composed.
Yeah.
And 9-movement, about 40-minute piece of work called Tower Music. And it's on it was released a few years ago on the Innova Recordings label out of Minneapolis. And it's amazing music. Been described as like Aphex Twin meets Xenakis kind of sound. Yeah. And last year he decided he wanted to create so that it could be performed live more easily. Yeah. He's created a percussion quintet arrangement of it for quote unquote standard percussion instruments. So it's like xylophone, 2 marimbas, vibraphone, and drum set. But then each player has a whole bunch of other found and normal percussion instruments as well. But the music is the same music. Right. And so we're premiering that in Ashland on November 8th, and we're about to get started on working on that project.
Yeah. So Ashland it sounds like it's pretty, like, really supportive of the arts and music, and are you kind of involved in that sort of?
Yeah, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival is based there, which is a huge 9-month-long theater festival of not just Shakespeare, but its origins.
Okay.
And Brit Festival is a big music festival with an orchestra 3 weeks out of the summer. Yeah. Pop Music Festival the rest of the summer. That's about a half hour from Ashland. Okay. We have Rogue Valley Symphony Orchestra there. The university, of course. So it's a very vibrant community and a lot of great people to collaborate with.
Great. Well, before we somewhat wrap up, I have a few other questions for you.
Sure.
Nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
We were talking about performances. Like, what is your, you can answer either one first. Your maybe best, like most memorable, like best musical performance, and maybe your worst. Like, not necessarily like, you rearranged somebody rearranged the bars on the marimba before you went on stage or something, but if anything comes to mind.
That's never happened.
Yeah, not yet.
Well, it's hard. It's always hard for me to. It's like when people ask me what my favorite instrument is,
or who your favorite kid is. Which one's your favorite?
I have a hard time answering those questions. But definitely one of my favorite musical experiences was playing drumming. Steve Reich's drumming at Lincoln Center with Redfish Bluefish.
Oh, yeah, cool.
With Steve Reich sitting in the front row.
Yeah.
And getting to talk to him afterwards. And that was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, so that one's a highlight for sure. We also, on that same concert, it was on the Bang on a Can Marathon in 1996. Okay. That was the closing performance of the whole marathon. The opening performance was we played Ballet Mécanique.
Oh, yeah.
George Antheil's Ballet Mécanique, and I played the xylophone one part on that, so that was super fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually one of my more... I know this isn't about me, but
no, please.
One of my more memorable musical experiences, performances, Bang on a Can. Also, it was almost 10 years ago. They had a 24-hour marathon. Yeah. And I was involved in an ensemble at Grand Valley State, which is like the local university here that played music for 18 musicians. So and it was kind of like this, supposed to be timed with when the sun was coming up. So we were playing, sound check was at 4:30 or something crazy. And then, we were playing. And that was like, just what a great experience to be playing that piece. And then at the festival and in New York. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's another of my favorite experiences was playing that piece. I've done that one a few times and I love that piece of music very much. And it's worst.
Well, yeah, we can skip over that. There's too many. I don't want. I know you got to drive back to Interlaken tonight, so maybe we don't have time.
There is a funny story about that. So if you want, I'll tell it.
Yeah.
You can always edit it out later.
Okay. Yeah.
So when I was in college, for my second degree, my music degree, I got a gig through a guy I went to school with to play a little cabaret show on the. There's a paddle boat, docked in Old Sacramento, California. So we did this cabaret show and show up for the first rehearsal. It's this cute little theater down in the bottom floor of the boat. And it's like, okay, it was pretty rough. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But then the first performance, I think we probably had 2 weekends of performance. The first performance, we as a quartet outnumbered the audience.
Oh boy. Quartet.
So there were like 3 people in the audience,
right.
and I was just like,
I'm sure they appreciated it.
And the
very
show
much.
was pretty bad, I have to say.
Okay.
It was pretty rough.
Yeah.
And I remember calling my older brother, who I've always really looked up to and respected. He's 15 years older than me.
Oh, okay.
And he's a musician and a really amazing, he was always, I think, kind of my inspiration, because growing up, he was such an incredible musician, songwriter, piano player, guitar. He can play anything. And I called him to kind of moan and complain about this gig I'd played. And he said, okay, I got you beat.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, oh. He said, yeah, once when I was living in LA and, I worked at a music store, but I also did singing telegrams to help pay the bills. He said, I got hired to go and sing to a dog that had just won a dog show. And these rich people hired me to come into their house, dress up in a tuxedo and sing to the dog.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, you got me beat.
That would be embarrassing, I think. It pays the bills.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think we've all had those kind of, lackluster performances.
Oh, sure.
There's more people in the ensemble than there is out, but
we do. And but it brings me quickly to something I tell my students, and I was talking with the Interlaken students about this yesterday, that no matter what the gig is, always do your best.
Oh, yeah.
And realize you're going to learn something from it, even if it's just that you don't want to take that gig next time, but you'll get something out of it.
Yeah.
And so many of my opportunities have come from people I've worked with in ensembles, worked with in teaching relationships, or just came to a concert I was playing and came up to me afterward and said, I liked your playing. Will you do this project with me?
You never know who you're going to meet.
You never know who's listening and who in that ensemble next to you is going to be an important connection later in your career. And if you're not taking it seriously or preparing your best and giving it your best, you could be blowing many opportunities.
Oh, yeah. That's a really great point.
Yeah.
So anything outside of music you like to do?
Yeah, lots of things. Fly fishing is a big one for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think I remember we talked about that at PASIC when you were
so I'm really
fishing.
into fly fishing. My daughter and I, she's an amazing fly fisher. She got into it. We got into it together, but she was very young, and she started going to these fly fishing camps and then got trained to be a guide. And she's just like in the water. She also swam competitively and played water polo, and like she's just a fish, I mean, she's just so comfortable in the water, and she's such an incredible fisherman and caster. And so she inspired. I just got to fish with her. My son graduated from high school, and she came for that, and we got to go out fishing together, and just so wonderful.
Yeah, so there's a lot, like in Oregon. I mean, I guess anywhere there's a river or something.
Yeah,
but,
we were lucky to live really close to so many great rivers. And I love hiking, and I love cycling, especially road cycling.
Okay, yeah.
But I commute to work cycling as well. And my wife and I are into archery a little bit. That's kind of a new one, but we both love it.
My wife wants to start doing golf.
Yeah,
so.
We tried that. My son was kind of interested in that for a while, so we all did it for a little bit. And my wife's still interested in doing it. I was kind of like, I don't know. It's frustrating. It's too frustrating. It's hard.
Well, I mean, we kind of have hand-me-down clubs from family, and she's like, I think we should do it. Like, we'll have something to do together. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
we
one
enjoyed
day.
it for a while.
Yeah. Archery's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even think, I'm going to go shoot arrows? Was it the Avengers? Was it watching the Avengers?
No, it's something my wife was always interested in. She was like, for years, kind of talking about how she wanted to try it. So for something, I don't remember if it was Christmas or birthday, so I bought her a bow. Yeah. And so we started going to this local guy who was teaching classes, so we would go into it.
Okay.
And and she just loved it, and I loved it too. So then I bought a bow later, and so we just go out and.
Is there a competitive aspect to it, or are there
No,
like competitions, or just for you?
There are. We don't do that.
Okay.
But we go out to these things that are called 3D shoots, which are when there's an archery range, like a golf range, with targets scattered all over a beautiful hillside or something, and you walk around and shoot at the different targets. But when they have the 3D shoots and they put these 3D foam animals out, everything from like little tiny squirrels and badgers up to like dinosaurs and Bigfoot and all kinds of crazy things.
T-Rex.
But it's fun because you feel like you're, it's a little more like, oh, I'm shooting at something other than just a flat target.
Yeah.
Now we're also vegan, so it's a little ironic, but it's just fun.
Yeah.
You're like,
so
I got it. I killed it. Oh wait, it's just foam. That's good.
Is it like do they pop up, or like, the surprise ones where like the grandma crossing the street that you don't want to touch, or like?
No, most of them are stationary, but there's usually at least one that moves. So like someone's got a rope, or you trip a rope and it goes across, and you have to shoot it while it's moving.
Do you have to go collect your arrows and everything?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So.
And we've lost many of them.
Yeah, I was going to say some that go wild or whatever. Go rogue, you never find them.
Yeah.
So I know when you were kind of first going to college and getting started, you were more sort of a business track. Is there another, if you weren't, I know this is sort of a strange question because of course you want to be a percussionist and a teacher and educator, but if you weren't, is there anything that you would gravitate to? Professional archerist? Archerist?
No, probably not that. I don't know. Although I have to say the hand-eye coordination thing, I think from being a percussionist really helps with that. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. But I love what I do. I really love what I do. I have I had another career first, in banking. So I feel super fortunate to have made that jump when I did.
Yeah.
It felt like a big risk at that point, in my life. I was like 25 and I'm quitting my job to go study music.
Yeah.
But my family was supportive and my wife was supportive and her family was supportive, which was great. So I have no second thought. I'm so glad I did that. I absolutely love what I do.
Yeah.
But I love the outdoors and I love recreation, that kind of thing. And I think that field I'm seeing in our university has an incredible outdoor expedition program and outdoor education program.
Right.
And I love what they're doing. And I think, man, that would be a cool field to go into for anyone who loves being in the outdoors.
That's really interesting because there's a kind of a local nature center in the Grand Rapids area called Blandford Nature Center, and I think they actually have a school. Like one of my wife's coworkers has a son that goes to the school at the nature center, like his grade school. So I'm always kind of curious, like what that involves or what's entailed in that. So I'll get back to you.
Okay.
I'll research that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So kind of final question: any guilty musical pleasures? Like mine's AC/DC, and maybe that's not really a guilty pleasure, but when I hear AC/DC on the radio, like I have to listen to it.
Yeah, mine is Cuban music.
Oh, okay.
And that's not an area. I mean, I've studied conga and played conga, but I never really got into that. I wouldn't, consider myself a, salsero or anything, you know. But I've always loved that music, and a few years ago, my wife and I started salsa dancing.
Oh, okay.
And I love the fact that I can participate in the music without having to play it.
Yeah.
And I love listening to the music. If I'm going to put on music to listen to, it's usually Cuban music, New Orleans jazz, or jazz in general, or like New Orleans brass band stuff.
Yeah, cool.
That's what I love to listen to, or Brazilian music too. That's another one. So those are my musical kind of guilty pleasures, but I don't feel guilty because they're all so incredible. You shouldn't either. AC/DC is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've mentioned that to people before, and they're like, "You don't feel guilty about that," but it's just like sort of unexpected, I guess. So. Well, thanks, Terry. I appreciate you taking some time, and all the best, and with the rest of your summer and everything else that you got going on. So. Thanks for coming by to visit.
It's been really great to see the factory here, and I appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, cool. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
This has been a BSP production, recorded and produced out of the Black Swamp Percussion facilities in Zeeland, Michigan. Audio assistance by Nathan Coles. And music by Adam Hopper.
call is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please disconnect at this time.